All right, welcome back to the History Lab here with Mr. Uhrig. Moving on to our next lesson on how we can learn how to learn history. So yesterday and the day before, we've talked about primary sources, we've talked about secondary sources, the different hats a historian wears. Today we're doing a little comparison. We're trying to look at some different documents, some different artifacts, stuff like that, and we're trying to determine, is this a primary source or is it a secondary source? So the objective, what's our goal for the day? For you, the student, well, I can analyze different types of sources by comparing primary and secondary sources. I'll bring up our handout for the day that is also on Google Classrooms. At the top of it here, you have a little T-chart. So, our directions. Watch the video clip on the next slide. Write down the examples it provides of primary and secondary sources. So, here in the video, the next slide, watch it. If whatever it says is a primary source, write down the examples. What it has for a secondary source, write down the examples on your T-chart. Next part of the handout here, I provided you the real definition of a primary and secondary source. So what I want you to do is read through these 15 examples of different sources and write a P if they're a primary source, or write an S if they are a secondary source. Pretty straightforward there for you as well. Finally, the last thing that we have to do today, at the bottom here, the next 6 slides are examples of either primary or secondary sources. At the bottom of your handout, write whether you think each one is a primary or secondary source. Let's do one of these together just so you have an idea of what to do. Here we have a very famous photograph of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. giving a speech. We know the civil rights movements lasted throughout the 60s, so we could probably date this sometime to the early 1960s before he was assassinated. So this photograph of him giving the speech, was it something that was taken there at the time, or is this recreated by someone who had seen a primary source? I think this one here is a primary source. It was taken at the time of the speech of the man giving the speech. If you wanted to know, well, how could it become a secondary source? Maybe if someone recreated the photograph through a painting. The painting could be considered a secondary source. But the photograph itself, primary. So, do that for the rest of these here. If you have any questions, so you know how to get a hold of me, email the remote learning team. Let me know if you have any questions. Not a whole lot to it today. We'll move on tomorrow. Thank you. Have a great day.